he's off the terrorist watch. When Musharraf was a terrorist, when Musharraf took power in a coup, when Musharraf purged all of his enemies, when Musharraf was knowingly aiding and abetting the financing of Dr. Khan's nuclear program, and Khan was also selling nuclear weapons secrets and technology to North Korea and to Iran and to other countries, including Libya. We didn't go after them once 9/11 came, and yet Dr. Khan could have told us what he had given to North Korea, but Musharraf, who we were paying money to, $11 billion total, would not give up Khan. He had been given a pardon, and then he was put under perpetual house arrest, which means that he has a big villa in Islamabad, and he had all the freedom he wanted. It's just that nobody could talk with him under any circumstances. And then we're watching Pakistan use the money we're giving it to build up its armed forces against India, its nuclear program against India, and doing nothing to really stop the radicals in its western frontier. So I'm looking at all this and I'm thinking, we've got an awful lot wrong in this scenario. Your thoughts?
Yes, no, I think we have. I mean, it's very selective, and it's very cynical. You know, there are some dictators who are on our side, and some dictators who we don't like, and it goes up and down. And Saddam Hussein was one of them. You know, one time he was a U.S. friend, and then he suddenly became a U.S. enemy, and it's the same thing in other countries. I mean, it's just appalling, really, that there's no continuity and consistency about policy, and so much is dictated by agendas which are not kept hidden deliberately, because I think if the public knew exactly what was going on, they'd be much more shocked than they are.
Noriega in Panama, he was our friend. He was a friend and ally of George Bush Sr. when he was CIA director.
In the Dominican Republic, Somoza in Nicaragua, particularly in Latin America, Central America. I mean, the list of dictators supported by the U.S. is extraordinary.
So this idea that Tony Blair is indignant about Saddam Hussein exclusively, to me, is just utter hypocrisy. I hope that at some point the British public realizes the responsibility that their government has.
Well, they did. They did, I think, which is why ultimately Tony Blair had to resign. I mean, it's a very complex thing that is hard to explain. That Tony Blair, on the one hand, could get re-elected, perhaps largely because the opposition seemed so pathetic and weak and poor leaders and so on. And yet he was very, very unpopular simultaneously at being re-elected because the public didn't like the Iraq War and the way he defended the Iraq War, and probably lied about the Iraq War as well.
My last question for you. In less than 4 months, we will have an election which might usher in a slight regime change, or just more of the same, or even worse. As someone who is deeply immersed in the politics of Iraq, as well as the pathos of the Iraqi people thrown into this humanitarian disaster, I would ask you to share with listeners those insights that you have about Iraq that our American media and politicians are ignoring, and think of it as instructing us now in something that is essential for us to know in making our election choices for the White House and Congress.
Well, I think the majority of Iraqis want the U.S. to get out. Even the Baker-Hamilton report, which came out in December 2006, pointed out that 61% of Iraqis support attacks on American forces. So it's not just a handful of foreign insurgents. It is a resistance movement that has the backing of the majority of Iraqis, so they should get out. And I think one just hopes that if Senator Obama is elected, he will stick to the promises that he's been making about bringing home the troops within 16 months. I know he's left lots of qualifications and caveats in there, but the central thing of getting the combat troops out seems to be a firm promise, and that has to be stuck to. But I just hope we don't have a repeat of what happened in November 2006 when the American public voted the Democrats in both houses of Congress, basically because they felt they were anti-war, and then the Democrat leadership in both the House and the Senate seemed to back off as soon as they got into power in 2007. So I hope that doesn't happen in 2009 all over again.
It will, because the American public is used to being lied to and then feels helpless because it's not in positions of power, because the only power it has is the power of the vote, and unfortunately, today, you buy the vote. We don't have a democratic process in America. That is a joke. We have lotteries. If we had a democratic process, Doug Henderson, sitting in the studio with me, an African-American male, could go to the American public and say, I have an opinion, and we would listen. Today, he has no opinion that the American public will hear outside this radio show because he does not have the people to support his presidential bid. We will spend over $1 billion to buy an office for someone. When you can spend $1 billion to buy an office, that is denigrating the very principles of a democratic process. So it's time that we stop this masturbating in public and calling it prayer. You know, we deceive ourselves constantly by, look at what we're doing. No, if you're rich enough in America, you can buy anything you want. And you buy access to power, and then with that, you buy control over the systems that could affect you. So that's what I'm saying, and I don't see anyone around Barack Obama in a policymaking position that's any different than the neocons. Remember, the real force of power in America, I can't speak for Britain, but I can tell you this absolute authority. The real power in America, I just finished doing a major documentary that won't be out for about 6 months on Wall Street, are names of people you've never heard of, faces you've never seen. The people who really have the power are the people who control the major institutions, the major banks, the major multinational corporations, and these are people who don't need more of anything. And why would they then put us in such harm's way? Because at the end of the day, these are people who are morally bankrupt, spiritually bankrupt, but boy, do they have large bank accounts. So there's no place to file for bankruptcy when you got that much money, that much power, that much control, and absolutely no spiritual values from which to temper those choices. So
right. Well, it's a bleak picture, I'm afraid.
It is, and unfortunately sometimes it's just like helping a drunk that's on the way down. If you give them $1 to buy the next drink, all you're going to do is create another dead cell in their kidney. So there comes time when you just got to let it fall and then see if there's anything left to pick up, and there will be something to pick up, and there will be change. I am an optimist about change, but I am not an optimist. I'm an absolute pragmatist about trying to offset the Pollyanna needs of New Age spiritualists who say, kumbaya, let's take the secret and everything will be better, versus the reality of people who laugh at that and jeer it and say no. And so until those in power defeat themselves, then there is no valid opposition to it, because the valid opposition that claimed to be valid, the Democrats won the mandate and immediately became the enemy. Nancy Pelosi and all the rest, when you vote against the Fourth Amendment, you're not a friend of the American public. When you vote for the Patriot Act, you've just eviscerated what George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and Thomas Paine worked for and sacrificed. So don't tell me what you do, show me what you do, because at the end of the day, friend, you are what you do, not what you say.
Right.
And soon enough we will see what people are by what they do. And my intuitive feeling is that we will once again be betrayed, but we'll be betrayed with a smile and a Teflon personality, and we won't look at the power behind the source. And that's where we don't look. And American media never looks at the power behind the source. I want to thank you, Jonathan Steele, for your work, your courage, for being out there, and your new book, Defeat, Why America and Britain Lost Iraq. All the best to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Okay. Good night.
I'm Gary Null, back in a moment.